Good morning, everyone. Nihal Krishan, back again for round two of an engaging AI conversation. I'm a tech reporter with FedScoop and CyberScoop, and cover the nexus of tech and government with a focus on tech policy issues like AI, cybersecurity, data privacy, and such. And I wanted to quickly introduce my fellow panelists, starting with Shawnna.
Oh, thank you so much for having us here today. My name is Shawnna Hoffman, and I'm the president of Guardrail Technologies. And it was fun for me to hear Guardrail mentioned so often earlier. I did not pay Adele or Yashwan to mention it. Hey, Adele. So really excited about the opportunity to be here. I spent over a decade in AI working on Watson. So it was fun for me to be kind of in the trenches. I had like many of you, seen Watson win Jeopardy. So I thought, oh, this is great. It's the answer to all my problems. I realized very quickly after building AI solutions that it wasn't the end-all be-all. And so I got into blockchain back in 2017 and have been very happy to combine the two. So I'm excited to be here today. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Eric Lapin, president of Form Free. Just brief history, 25 years, 15 of that was in banking and capital markets, as well as technology and analytics. And I've been focusing on empowering the consumer with their own data direct from the source in the lending business. So, we've been around, the company's been around for 15 years, mainly in the mortgage industry, and provided and validated income, asset, and employment direct from the source that consumers would control that data. And we are now focused on the Web3 approach, where we're having that data tokenized and could be shared by any consumer without their personal identifiable information provided until they want to share it. So it's empowering the consumer with their own data, sharing that data, possessing that data, and then lenders make decisions based off credit profiles and nothing else, no bias involved in that.
Hi, I'm Mark Wasser. Most of you know me because I was the CTO for GBA for a couple plus years. What most people don't know is that at the same time I was working for the stealth startup AGI Labs out in Seattle, and that was a project where I actually got to use professionally both GPT and blockchain for the past several years. There was GPT well before ChatGPT came out.
Thanks so much, Mark. So we're going to put up a couple of slides real quick right now to lay the groundwork and give some foundational facts and understanding of AI standards. So real quick, the reason we're having this conversation right now and the reason standards for AI and blockchain matter is it's not just the folks who read my stories and reporting, which is mostly insiders within the government and tech companies or blockchain entities, but the wider sphere of the general public has an interest in this as well, because things like algorithmic discrimination, data privacy, safe and effective systems, human alternatives. The key areas of standards of whether it's AI or blockchain are important because beyond one, of course, there's human and civil rights concerns, and people want to make sure that their data is protected, that things are transparent, and so there's a consumer concern in making sure that certain standards are in place. But also money talks, and the ways in which companies succeed at building AI or blockchain technologies is when there's a clear standard that exists as to how tools and technologies are supposed to perform. Where is the data that they build upon? Where does that come from? What transparency is needed? And standardization allows companies to have the trust that they need to have with their consumers. And so if that trust doesn't exist, they'll never make money. They'll never actually have paying customers. And so it's not just a sort of pie in the sky intellectual theoretical element. It has very real world consequences. The standards that we're creating right now for AI and blockchain will have an effect for years to come on consumers, but also on businesses and those trying to sell products, because without these standards and trust, you just won't get consumers and widespread adoption in the first place. And so just wanted to give everyone a quick lay of the land in terms of what are the standards in place right now in the EU, which is one of the only places where we have AI standards baked into the law, which is the EU Digital Services Act, the EU AI Act. They've been discussing this for some number of years, and it finally passed at the end of last year, and we've had some developments this year, and it's expected to be the compliance is supposed to start in early 2024, and it covers areas like illegal content, transparent advertising, disinformation and misinformation, which are obviously big in an election year. And it requires explainability, black box explainability, decision-making disclosures, and advertising targeting practices. So that's the EU. In America, which is on our next slide, we mostly have voluntary AI standards right now on the national level, and on the state and local level, there's a few laws that have been passed, but by and large, it is voluntary. If we can move to our slide on U.S. AI regulations. Okay, we can start here. So, the two key AI standards on the national level are the White House has its blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights, which, as I mentioned before, is focused on safety and effective systems, algorithmic discrimination, data privacy, notice and explanation, and human alternatives. This is a voluntary framework that the White House has put out. It's not mandatory for anybody to follow it, but a number of major companies, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, others, have made voluntary commitments to incorporate parts of this into their business model. And then we have the NIST AI Risk Management Framework, which is the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which has put out a risk-based, use case-specific risk management framework for AI, which is supposed to work complementary to the White House AI Bill of Rights, but some in industry have said that there are contradictions. But these are the two main ones: the AI Bill of Rights from the White House, and the NIST AI Risk Management Framework. And then we'll move on to the next slide. And so this is a real quick snapshot of U.S. AI regulations. As I mentioned, there's a sort of a patchwork of laws that are moving through state legislatures, a very small handful that have actually passed. We have New York City's Local 144 law, Illinois has its 820 ILSC, Maryland has its Section 3717, California has its AI bill. And so, this sort of is an explanation of why we need something on the federal and national level, is because if there's a patchwork of state solutions, it is confusing for consumers. It makes it difficult for companies to have a standard approach across the country. And so this is why we really do need to come together and have something on the national stage, which is why we have some action happening in the federal government, like the AI Research Resource Act, which Congress has passed recently, the American Data and Privacy Act, which is still in the works, the Algorithmic Accountability Act, and then FTC rulemaking and enforcement. The Federal Trade Commission has taken a lead role in AI enforcement based on laws that already exist on the books. So hopefully that gives you a decent starting point and foundation as to the conversation that we're about to have on AI and blockchain standards, and why it is so critical both for consumers and for companies and those creating this. So I think we're good with the slides here. Thanks, tech team. So I wanted to start off. If Eric, if you could give us a little lay of the land. I've explained the AI standard side. If you could give us a lay of the land on blockchain standards and where they are right now and where they're headed.
Yeah, and from where we are today, especially in the use case side of things, we see a lot of it, especially as it relates to fractionalization. We see it a lot with, I'll give you an example, real estate, title insurance, and lending is a great use case to discuss, because you see a lot of companies figuring out what blockchains are going to be used, how does the artificial intelligence work with that, and as you saw on one of the slides, there's one of the bullets was about black box modeling. And that becomes extremely important as we utilize the blockchain, because we want to make sure as best as we can that the data that's being utilized is source data. And for an example, source data, an example would be banking account information, financial information that is permissible by the consumer for attaining a loan. That's one primary reason why you see that. And you'll see a lot of that has to do with, especially in the banking and financial services space, that identity is very important. So from the banking side, you want to look at KYC, AML. You're probably familiar with SSI, self-sovereign identity, but there's another piece of that called SSFI, which is self-sovereign financial identity, which is fairly new, but being reviewed and looked at by the financial services industry to look at transaction data direct from the source, and that digital ID is anchored to the chain. So from the blockchain standpoint, you're making sure that whatever that digital identity is verified, that chain is number one, interoperable, number two, that it does have the standards to work with certain types of artificial intelligence. And some of the changes that we're seeing, especially in the United States and other parts of the world, is removing black box modeling, especially when it has to do with inclusion, because there's some bias that comes into that. So with artificial intelligence, using linguistics, you can do mathematical deterministic off of source data to figure out a true ability to pay for a consumer. So as it deals with standards, Nihal, that blockchain and artificial intelligence working together to really look at what data is being utilized, where does that data reside, and how is the intelligence being used as far as removing bias from any type of decisioning.
Understood. But real quick, Eric, if you could give us a brief explanation on the national scale or on the local side, what sort of blockchain standards exist right now? Give us a sense of what some have called the Wild Wild West.
Yeah, I mean, we're really seeing that there are organizations that, you mentioned FTC earlier, but you can take other organizations such as RESPA, Federal Credit Reporting Act. They're utilizing standards that you really have to start with verifying who someone is and creating that digital identity, and that's really the most important of what we're seeing to get it out of the wild, wild west and remove a lot of the fraud that you would see. So I would say that's probably, if I were to pick one, that's the most important.
It is which one?
Identity.
Identity, okay.
Yeah.
Understood. And then, Mark, if you could maybe shed light on some of the, if you could compare and contrast, whether it's identity or some of the other standards that Eric was referring to, and then the AI standards that we mentioned before, in what ways are AI standards and blockchain standards different from each other? In what ways do they have overlap and similarity?
So I guess what would be most helpful is to talk about the Artificial Intelligence Blockchain Maturity Model Supplement. There really are no standards that attempt to address both artificial intelligence and blockchain. There are a good number of standards, and they're being developed in real time for artificial intelligence, particularly after the generative AI explosion of last fall. There are definitely blockchain standards for particular industries, as Eric mentions, but AI is not one of them. The blockchain standards that the blockchain maturity model appendices put out is basically how can blockchain be used to make this particular type of application easy to promote sharing, make it trustless, make it private, and also make it so that these systems can be evaluated. In one sense, AI is a stand-in for virtually any software product that could be dangerous, that has lots of people working on it, where we've got to have privacy, where we need to be able to evaluate the results and change course in the middle. So that's what we're striving for here. AI is also a particularly good example because it separates cleanly into two radically different types of systems. We have the type of gradient descent neural networks that we've been familiar with for the past decade plus, and then we have the new generative AI systems. And for the neural networks, we actually do have source data, with the problem being that at times it's data that needs to be HIPAA compliant. And with the generative AI, we really don't know what the source data is. Now, both of them, most of the time, also have black box problems. So these are the things that the standard, the problems that blockchain can help solve. And what we want to do in the AI Blockchain Maturity Model Supplement is to point out all these shortcomings of AI that blockchain can help resolve and how we can actually resolve them.
Totally. So I think that brings me to my next question as we sort of turn from understanding the problem to solutions. You know, I think the key challenges, as you outlined with AI or blockchain, are we want standards that allow consumers and those who create these tools to have control. We want some sort of confidentiality or privacy. We want the ability to make quick updates and iterations, and we want an element of transparency. So I'm curious, how can blockchain standards address this problem, give us this set of tools? We'll start with you, Shawnna.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to mention one thing. So I was the chair of the CFTC's Distributed Ledger Technology Committee years ago.
And the CFTC is?
Oh, sorry, U.S. Commodities Futures Trading Association. Thank you. Yes, thank you very much. Are you from there? No. I was going to say stand up and turn around. So, and it was fun to be part of industry and be brought in on those meetings early on when blockchain was something that was really not talked about a whole lot. And it was an educational opportunity for the commissioners to ask questions to those of us actually building solutions. We are seeing that same thing now, where we have many committees on the Hill. Even my own Congressman, Darren Soto, I've had great conversations with him about where we are in regards to AI regulation and how this works. So my background is in legal, but also, of course, in technology. Prior to Guardrail Technologies, I was the chief technology leader for legal and strategy at Dell. And one of the things that's always seen is it all starts out with what we call in the legal industry soft law. It's the guidance, it's the standards, and then it moves into regulations many years later. Right now, everyone in this room should be part of these conversations that are happening with every agency. If you don't have one on the list, may I ask you today to please, because they need to hear from you. My local congressman, I mean, he was absolutely busy, and all of a sudden he heard AI, and I'm forming a company in your town. I was the first one to be able to sit down with him in that session that we were at and actually have him hear what my concerns are. Responsible AI is so important to me, and it's because I've been in AI for almost 20 years now. AI is more than 90 things. When we started doing this, I mean, it was developed in 1956. This is not new. What's new is it has been released to the entire world. Something that I used to charge $20 million for, not joking, when I was at IBM, is now free. And so we have everyone in the entire universe, if they want to, able to get onto ChatGPT, for example, and put in any question. You know, one of my friends had called me. She's like, hey, we're going to go out for dinner. ChatGPT, I asked it where we should go, and it stated where we should go. And it wasn't a real place. It was some made-up place. Yeah. Actually, that would be funny. No, so we have some issues with a system that was made by fallible humans, by humans for humans, and it gets things wrong about 26% of the time. And so what do we need to do today? We need to put standards in. Exactly. So you know where I'm going with that. So I wanted to mention just how the law works, why it's important that every person in this room becomes part of these conversations, because the one thing you do not want anyone to regulate is the technology itself. And the reason I say that is because technology, the moment we take a breath, is going to change. It's probably 91 things now. 92, 93. So as we start to think through where do we want society to go, I'm more worried about the outcomes and worried about biases and discrimination. And so where I see blockchain fitting in is to make sure that every piece of data that is used in any training model is understood, is known, there's no more black boxes, and it can come out to the surface. There's a great example that happened years ago with with Amazon, actually. They ended up training their system using, of course, AI, machine learning, I think it was like in 2018, and they trained it all off of resumes. It was their recruiting system, but it was all majority of men's resumes. And so what did it do? Women like me are ousted out of the system because I did not fit whatever model they needed. We have to make sure that our data is not biased, that our training happens from. So anyways, I just wanted to mention those few things, and hopefully that's a bit helpful for those in the room and gives you a little kick to go out and help.
Certainly. Thank you. And so I'm curious, to sort of build off of the great foundation that you've given us. What is the role of blockchain in AI when it comes to securing machine learning algorithms and transparency and availability and privacy concerns and algorithms and algorithmic bias and discrimination? In what way specifically can blockchain standards play a role in alleviating this, and do we see any examples of this already occurring?
So fundamentally, blockchain should be the substrate and the control system around AI models. There are plenty of malicious actors in the world, so we've got to be able to, for example, record what was the data that the model was trained on. Again, it may be HIPAA compliant, but that is fine because you can actually set up certain blockchains so that the stored procedures can see and operate on HIPAA data, but no one else can actually get to that data. So you actually can do some incredible things in the medical field, as Marquis told you, and still maintain confidentiality. You need to have documentation of the results of what this model comes up with. If possible, you want to have transparent reasons, not black box reasons. That may be too much to ask for, but honestly, there's no reason why there can't be some post hoc analysis done by something other than the neural network itself. You also need to be able to evaluate systems. Again, you're getting back into smart contracts. There are a lot of algorithms that can be run on data so that it is not blind to particular variables, because that's problematic because a lot of the time other things stand in for those variables. For instance, race is easily replaced by income or zip code or something of the sort. What these algorithms actually do is they pick specific variables and ensure that basically the results for that variable are the same for all the potential values. So that way you're ensuring that minorities get exactly the same result distribution that, for example, whites get, that poor people get exactly the same distribution that rich people get, which is really important because you start looking at things like law enforcement. And there are plenty of programs now where AI does sentencing. And it's an absolute nightmare because if you're poor, you are going to get a much worse outcome. And this is the type of thing that blockchain can help with. If we know how the models were created, what the data is, if we can actually throw fake data sets against it and rely upon the results and see the bias, if we can also use these algorithms, all of this becomes public data. it's very easy then to start evaluating, and we can ensure that we get the results that we want. And again, the blockchain maturity model really addresses results. It can make suggestions as to this is one or more ways in which this can be done, but that's more to prove that it's possible and to inspire thinking.
Understood. So, there have been a series of challenges in coming up with AI standards, as we've said, on the federal level, on the national and local level. I was hoping, whether it's with the blockchain maturity model that you just mentioned, Mark, or others, if any of you can peel back the layer into what it is like to create and come up with blockchain standards, and what do those conversations look like behind closed doors, and what are some of the challenges and successes in creating said blockchain standards?
Yeah, and I think we're all saying the same thing, which is great because we all come from different backgrounds. But at the core of all this is conscious capitalism. This is intention economy. And intention economy was a term coined back in 2012. The author of the book is Doc Searls. Highly recommend you read it. But it's basically, it's taking information and data, making sure it's accurate in its source data, and making sure that decisions that are made actionable on top of that are accurate. And when we're looking at these, when we're talking about the models that we're speaking about here, at the very core of all this, it all comes to inclusion. And as a society, we've lacked that since the beginning of time. And one of the things that this solves from the blockchain and AI standpoint is the standards, is looking at the data that, where does the data reside? How do you make it actionable? Can the consumer control the sharing of this data? And we're seeing that switch from the Web 2 where we are today, where you have the big corporations, the FANGs, Facebook, Apple, Google, all those guys, utilizing data, but the consumer, all of us in here, the consumer, don't know where it's being used, how it's being used, and we're certainly not making money off of it. So change that, flip the script on all that, and now put it into the Web 3 space where we're going, where that sharing of the data now can be utilized by the consumer. The standards around that, I think, number one, the first standard is there's this organizations, Mark talks about HIPAA, talked about when you were at CFTC. I was very fortunate when I was at Credit Suisse to work with CFTC. We didn't know each other back then, but worked with RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation. And that was really being used for simple things back, this was like 10, 12 years ago or so. But recently, I don't know if anyone read an article, but Bloomberg just has really, in the financial services space, come up with something that basically said, from a commodity standpoint, utilized 50 million data sets, 1.2 million hours of retrieving this data and putting artificial intelligence on it, but not using the black box models. So we've all three said it. Black box models will bring in the bias to any sort of decisioning, whether it's going to be with HIPAA, RESPA, anything with CFTC, OCC, GDPR. Good friend Omar right here, that we're on a committee with MISMO together, which is in the housing industry. He works with Ginnie Mae, which is part of housing, HUD, Housing, Urban, and Development. And standards, we have a standards group that we work with there, and really a lot of it is making sure that the data sets that are being used are source data, that it's accurate data, because anything that's then going to be placed on the chain and anchored on the chain is going to have accuracy, bias removed, inclusion at the core, and then artificial intelligence that you use on there. What we're seeing a lot recently is the mathematical determination of someone's ability to pay. We have 50 million Americans in the United States that have low or no FICO, because everyone's judged by a 3-digit number that says, I have to be in debt to get more debt. That's what it is. It's wrong, it doesn't work. It's a vector, you still need it, but you also need to look at someone's cash flow, discretionary income, other things that are happening in that person's life, bring it all together. Now you have an open aperture of really determining someone's ability to pay. So that's an example of a black box that maybe decades ago was helpful, but it's not helpful anymore. We got to stop and look at that. So the standards are, let's take more of a linguistics approach or natural language processing approach. I'd like to hear your opinion on that, but we're seeing more and more decisioning that's made without the bias when you look at it from that side.
Thanks, Eric. I think very shortly here we're going to open things up to questions from the audience, but I just wanted to give everyone one last chance. If anyone has any closing statements or wants to add anything regarding real-life use cases of AI standards that you have seen professionally or personally, before we move it over to the audience. Shawnna.
So I've been fortunate to. It's on the top. No, it is green. Are you guys hearing me? That's weird.
There you go.
Okay, now good? No. I don't know why. Okay, that's much better. All right, I've been fortunate to be part of two different AI ethics committees, one when I was at IBM and also the other one when I was at Dell. And I love the big corporations who are really jumping in, like Oracle, also putting these AI ethics standards out there. And they're putting guidance, they're being those who are leading the charge. I would absolutely, these are public models. Take a look, see what they're doing, and also bring those in-house to your corporation, your department. When you're using generative AI, it's available, of course, to everyone. Make sure that you are putting those standards in place and you're checking your work. One of the reasons why I formed Guardrail and renamed the company that is because I think it's extremely important for us to have those guardrails to make sure that we are fact-checking, looking at contradictions. We're not one and done using the AI systems. I think an important standard for us is to make sure that we are looking at the AI and those results. There's a very good explanation of that. I don't know if you all saw Mata versus Ivanka case, those in the legal realm. We all were pretty mortified that there was an attorney who had went to ChatGPT, requested a motion to be created, and the motion ended up citing 5 cases. ChatGPT created 2 of those on its own. So 3 cases were real, 2 were not. They turned this into the court. Of course, the clerk who asked to check all of the motions that come in said, whoa, hold on. 2 of these are not even real. They asked the attorney, where did you find them? Now he said a very reputable company name, and unfortunately that caused lots of issues. I am surprised that the sanction was not more than $5,000. But he was first in the industry, unfortunately, to get caught. I knew somebody would. So again, it's fact-checking, it's checking our work, making sure that what comes out, just knowing first off, it's going to have biases, it's going to have problems, it's going to have hallucinations up to 26% of the time. Check your work. So that needs to be a standard that comes into play.
Thanks so much. Very quickly, last thoughts from Eric and Mark before we turn it over to the audience.
One thing that's very worthwhile to note is that AI standards tend to be of 2 different types. One is quality, and that's something that the blockchain maturity model can help with. Another is where AI can or cannot be used. And that's a problematic area for standards anyways, and it probably cannot be controlled by such things. Also, with regard to ChatGPT and hallucinations, there are numerous ways in which that problem can be handled. ChatGPT even has the capability to go out and check for source material and verify any of its facts. So if you have it set up correctly, that shouldn't be that much of a problem. There are a whole bunch of other things that can be dealt with ancillary systems. A lot of the time for decisions for ChatGPT, one of the things that we worked with out at AGI Labs was making it so that decisions could be explained in ordinary English whenever they were made by a generative AI system. These are not things that are impossible. A lot of these problems are because many of the companies currently are insisting on one big system rather than separate best-of-breed systems to do some of the jobs. I mean, the whole idea of reinforcement learning by human feedback is a nightmare. As long as the companies follow this, it will be easy to jailbreak ChatGPT and cause it to give harmful answers and hallucinate. So the standards really have to be about results, and where we can influence results is where our standards need to be.
Thanks so much. I think we're going to turn it over to the audience and give Eric the first chance to answer, if that's all right. Does anyone have any questions? Oh, I guess maybe we'll start right here and then go to the back of the room.
Good morning. My name is Ryan Cooper. I represent DeVille Crypto Solutions, and I just had a question. Are you all segregating your attacks at the solutions for sexism, racism, and classism, because they all kind of fall in the same category, but they all have very different solutions, and I'm just wondering if you're solving them in a segregated manner.
Good question. So the use case that I was talking about earlier is solving for that, and also bringing into what the panel members were saying about it's about the results, and it's about the standardization of the data that's being used. So just let's take an example from wealth generation, or ATP, which stands for ability to pay. Big issue that we've had in the United States and the rest of the world, but I'll tackle the United States for now, is sex, gender, race have had decisioning that's been detrimental to a lot of people. And by the use of blockchain and the use of artificial intelligence, by looking at removing the black box model in this case, because the black box model has been used by automated underwriting decisioning. It's been used by credit scoring. It's realized, a lot of people understand that this has to change, so there are a lot of things that are changed. What's happening right now as we speak is basically taking information that is direct from the source of a person that permissions the bank accounts, open banking platforms, if you're familiar with that, Finicity, Plaid, a bunch of them out there. When the consumer permissions that data to be utilized, the artificial intelligence can now come on and have linguistics, utilizing morphology, looking at the grammar, the syntax, really determining the ability to pay, and it becomes tokenized. So that information is a token, which is the representation of the value of that ability to pay, and it removes all the bias in the decisioning, where you have lenders that can say, I like this credit profile, I like this alternative scoring model to know the ability to pay. Here's our loan offers. And then once the loan offer is accepted by the consumer, then the consumer shares their token. Hit share token, and that information is shared, and your PII, which is personable identifiable information, is then shared. Then it's Coop. Coop lives here. This is where he's employed. And then
Waiting to share somebody's race or sex, and
it's not done until after the offer is accepted and made on the merits of the ability to pay, and it removes the bias.
Thank you. I think we have time for just one or two more questions. So we'll go. Well, yeah, please.
I'll share the mic right after you. Sorry. I had like an aha moment as I was coming in. I was listening to the radio, and the radio said that 80% of the educational colleges are using AI to make decisions now for reviewing applications of students that are coming in. That's a use case situation that I want to see, how do we incorporate this combination of blockchain with AI to not have the bias that you're talking about be applied to admissions in colleges and universities. Because if we have a bot looking at an application and not taking into the humanity, which is who we want to be our next generation of innovators, I'm not sure how that we're going to solve this. But that's an application that's not business-wise, but it is in the education business. So throwing it out there, how do you see we solve this problem?
So there are actually two different answers to both your question and his question. If you're talking about racism, sexism, and economics, for the neural network gradient descent type AI, the ones that tend to give either scores or yes, no answers, those are actually similar problems from that viewpoint. So solving that problem with the algorithms that ensures that you get the same result, regardless of, what race you are, what economic status you are, that works. It's pretty much a solved problem, except for the fact that we don't implement it in 99% of the cases we should. There's also the problem of the large language models. And if you go to Google and you type in, something like, a doctor is a, male or female, you'll get male. A nurse is a female. There's so much embedded in our language in the internet, and we actually don't have ideas, or we've got ideas, but we certainly don't have established standard operating procedures for how to deal with that. And in particular, it would take a good amount of work. You'd basically have to build special type of large language model that recognizes traits that you think are positive or negative. This is actually something that we were attempting to deal with and are still attempting to deal with out in Seattle. That is nowhere near a solved problem. It's effectively giving the AI a rubric in the same way that you would give a human being a rubric. If these things are mentioned, give them this much score. If these things are mentioned, or if these things are mentioned. But those are open questions.
Okay, for our last question.
Did you want to comment? I'm sorry. No.
We actually don't
I feel
have
like
enough
we're on
time
stage.
for a lot of
I'll take it
comments.
offline. I can
because
take it
we're already
offline.
over time. So just the question quickly.
Okay, is there a certificate authority thinking in terms of blockchain instances using a third-party nonprofit certificate authority that has no skin in the game, whether it be evaluating this or that? Is that concept being thought about?
I think you just answered her question. That's literally what I was going to bring up, was
So,
a
so
neutral
the
third
answer
party.
is yes, there are blockchain standards that are concerned with that.
All right.